One of the major frustrations of modern dual sports, at least to my mind, is that we've passed the heyday of the 650cc single, the big bore thumpers with that maximum tractor factor. And when you look around now, the only thing that's really left in the modern era that's built properly to go off-road and is a big bore thumper is the KTM 690 Enduro R. I might be opening up Pandora's box here, but when I look at that 698 Hypermotard from Ducati, I can't help but look at that thing and think, you know what? That looks like it would be the perfect enduro or maybe even a rally bike. Some of you are going to say, Solid, this is just speculation, and you're absolutely correct, but this is well-reasoned and critically thought out speculations. Plus, when I get that tingle in my jingles, I'm usually onto something. It could be herpes, but I could also be right.
Start it up.
Okay, the first major point that sets the foundation for why I believe we could see an enduro from Ducati based on the 698 Mono is the modular platform. For those of you that have been living under a rock, it's a simple concept. You take an engine and the chassis platform and you design it in a way that you can make multiple motorcycles out of that one platform. So you can interchange parts and hey presto, you've got a cruiser, you've got a naked, you've got a sport bike, and you've got an adventure bike. This is a very common practice by a lot of manufacturers. They all do it. And why do they like the modular platform? Because it saves a whole pile of money in R&D costs, because you're not starting from scratch, from the ground up for every motorcycle to offer to all the different categories of consumers. You're starting ahead of the pack because you've got the engine and the basic chassis already. You're already a step above the competition. So it saves you all this engineering and design, R&D costs, and it's a big savings on the manufacturer. The other benefit, which is harder to prove but still arguable, is it allows manufacturers to bring products to the consumer in multiple categories at a much faster rate than building the bike from the ground up. Because you're starting ahead, you've already got that motor and chassis, you're able to get an adventure bike out, a sport bike out, a naked bike for commuting. Lots of different types of bikes to lots of different consumers to capitalize on that demand about saving money and making money on the other end. Which leads me to my point about Ducati. In the era of the modular platform, and on top of that, Ducati has participated in that modular platform ethos already with engines and chassis making multiple bikes. Why would they not go through this process with a 698 Mono Hypermotard and capitalize on that fantastic motor that they've developed? It makes no sense for them to put all that R&D into a ground up brand new motorcycle, their first single cylinder in a very long time. Why would you not capitalize on that motor and make a series of motorcycles out of the one platform? It would just be idiotic not to do so, and I don't believe Ducati are dumb. Expensive, but not dumb. My second major point is the birth of the Supermoto and the Supermotard. They're both interchangeable really. The difference is Moto is for motorcycle, Motard I believe is French for rider, so it's just different names for the same type of bike. The Hypermotard was born out of the Supermotard scene. So what exactly did the Supermoto come from? It's an easy recipe. The Supermoto, and therefore the Hypermotards that were developed out of the Supermoto, came from the dirt bike and dual sport world. The simple idea is throw some road wheels on there with some super sport tires and have maximum fun out of your dirt bike, being able to ride it on the road like a sport bike while still having that off-road capability. So that was the core idea of the Supermoto, and the Hypermotard was born out of that Supermoto scene. So my point here is that Ducati have just made a single cylinder Hypermotard 698cc. So who's to say that Ducati have just done this backwards, releasing their Hypermotard first because that is the strongest piece of brand identity that they have, because they're known for making Hypermotards. They've got bigger versions of this bike in the lineup, and later on down the track they will release the dirt version of this bike, the enduro or the rally, whatever they call it. That makes a lot of sense because generally speaking, a Supermoto and sometimes a Hypermotard will have a lot of features that make it very off-road capable because it comes from an off-road bike. I think the fact that it's in the Supermoto category is a strong case that it could be backwards engineered to get off-road pretty easily. Point number 3 as I die of heat exhaustion is the specs themselves. There are a few telltale signs here that this Hypermotard has been designed to be able to go off-road, or at least has features that means it could be reverse engineered to go off-road and do it fairly competently. The first is the weight. That sticks out like dog's balls. At just over 160 kilos wet, this is a fairly light bike that's just over the weight of the KTM 690 Enduro R. So I think that's a very respectable weight. And I would argue if you drop that huge twin exhaust at the back for a single cylinder aftermarket job, you'd be able to hit the mark of what the KTM 690 Enduro R weighs, or possibly below it. The second feature is the suspension. It's pretty serious on this bike. We've got 45mm upside down forks, fully adjustable with 215mm of travel, and we've got 240mm of travel at the rear, and it's also fully adjustable. So that's some pretty serious kit for a road bike. So that suspension will cope easily with the off-road. And we should also take into account that the Ducati could easily raise the travel even more for the off-road applications. Even in its current form on the Hypermotard, would easily be up to the task of riding off-road. Number 3 is that high front mudguard. Whilst this is a design cue for the Hypermotard, it does show that it could easily accept a fully knobby tire for the off-road sections. Of course, you would want it to extend out a little bit longer and catch more of that mud. But the point is, in its current form, it's got plenty of room for serious off-road tires. Number 4 that's encouraging as well is it has dual sport service intervals because it is designed to be a Hypermotard. It's got road bike service intervals at 15,000 kilometers for servicing and 30,000 kilometers for valves, which is pretty decent and would be fantastic as a dual sport, as that means you could do most of your multi-day trips without having to worry about having to change oil mid-trip. Number 5, getting back to the exhaust, is it's routed nice and high on the bike. We don't have an underslung exhaust where it can get hit by rocks, or when you're doing log crossings and gets pancaked off-road. No, they've routed this nice and high out of the way, like you see with any proper off-road machine. The dual-sided swing arm as well is also encouraging. Ducati don't always do that. They have some single-sided swing arm bikes, which aesthetically looks amazing, but it's not very practical for the off-road. So the fact that this has dual-sided swing arms is very encouraging. For my eye, it looks like the oil filter is housed within the motor. It's not protruding and sticking out where it will get knocked or damaged when you're riding off-road by a rock, a log, a stick, or anything like that. So that is also very encouraging that the oil filter is tucked away safely. Is that specifically designed because it will be going off-road? Who knows, but it does mean that that is very convenient if Ducati do decide to make this enduro. And number 8, which is pretty tenuous, I will admit, but the foot pegs on this, you can remove the rubber inserts and you've got your traditional off-road bear trap pegs, just pure metal for maximum grip. And that's just what I noticed on the bike. Is there anything that you've been able to spot to add to this? Chuck your thoughts down below. Major point number 4 is Ducati have made no secret about this bike going head-to-head with the KTM 690 SMT. That's KTM single cylinder Supermotard. And what is the 690 SMT based off? It's based off the 690 Enduro R, which came out first, and then KTM used that platform to develop the Supermotard. Therefore, is it really a stretch of the imagination that if Ducati have built this bike from the ground up to compete with the Supermotard from KTM, why they wouldn't also use that platform to develop an enduro or rally bike to go head-to-head against the 690 Enduro? In the era of the modular platform, I think this is a fairly strong possibility. And my 5th and final point is Ducati's move into the off-road world in a big way lately. We've seen the massive popularity of their desert sleds, also their Desert X adventure bike, and they've also announced their 450 MX bike recently as well. They're really moving into the off-road world in a big way. I think this is also a very positive sign that we really could see a 698 Enduro R from Ducati in the future. So what do you think? Do you think this is a strong possibility that Ducati could make a 698 Enduro R, or maybe even a rally bike, or maybe a super light adventure bike based off this motor? Chuck your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear your opinions. As always, don't forget to stay shiny side up. Oh. Man, it is too damn hot to make a video. What is wrong with me?